Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bowtie Security Guy After Dark, episode 34. With me today is my buddy Mike Wilkes. Mike, I wanted to have you on the podcast for a while. We worked together when you were at Marvel, but let's kind of go back to the beginning. Like, how did you get into technology?
Well, let's see. A Timex Sinclair computer with 2K of memory. The
Nice.
ZX81 is what it was called in the UK. That was something that I coveted and asked for Christmas, and my parents thankfully gifted me. And so that's where I started learning programming, understanding computers, being frustrated by them, uh, teaching them to do my bidding. Um, I like to think of myself as a 30 computer user. And if you don't know three ways of abusing a tool, you don't know how to use it. And so my upgrade was a 16K memory pack, right, which was pretty impressive. But you still had to type in your programs and save them to a cassette tape, right? I think that was the Timex. And then the Commodore 64 came along, right? And that was amazing. I got a 300 baud modem, started phone freaking, dialing up bulletin board systems in Alaska, dialing into the Telnet system, not Telnet, but Telnet, and visiting the University of Delft, FTP services, and trading wares, downloading software, learning about how the internet worked from bulletin board systems. So it's pretty much the story of war games, right? But without the global thermonuclear option.
Well, I think a lot of us started that way too, like kind of trading on bulletin boards and engaging in bulletin boards. I remember downloading like the Anarchist cookbook and stuff on bulletin boards, and thinking it was the coolest thing ever. So, well, like, when did you get your first like gig within technology? I mean, obviously, you and I are both seasoned, so we've been doing this for a bit. When was your first gig, and like that you could actually work on tech and get paid for it?
Well, I suppose it was writing a program to keep track of my parents' bowling league, right? So that was the first time I actually got paid, right? And that was when I learned the terrible, terrible lesson about double-sided 5 1/4 inch floppy disks, right? When you punch out the hole on the side and you turn it over and you get to use the other side of the disk. Um, and unfortunately, I ended up wiping my only copy of that bowling program because it was a double-sided hard drive. And so it was able to read and write both sides. And I flipped it over and I was like, I can make a backup on it, silly, youthful, high school, junior high school kind of mistake. But that's what taught me the value of backups and offsite backups and having multiple copies, right? The 3-2-1 mantra, three copies, two on different media, one of them offsite.
Yeah, and I think that's such a key thing. And many of the investigations that I've been a part of too, like if they had done that same mantra, like they would be okay, right? Like there's so many
You have to be
times
careful.
where
Backups are not a silver bullet.
no,
County
not
of
anymore.
Suffolk, right? Suffolk, New York, got hit with ransomware, and the threat actors had been there for like 6 months, and the forensics came in and said your backups only go back 90 days. All of your backups are infected. And whenever Anthony Carter tells the story, because he was the administrator for Suffolk County when that ransomware attack, it hit VMware, I think, through a vulnerability. There's always a collective gasp in the room because everyone thinks of backups as your get out of jail free card, right? You have backups, you're golden, you don't have to pay the ransom, you're good. No, backups, especially if you've never restored from them, right? Backups are useless. Restores, however, are golden. That's the true mantra there. So if you haven't tested your backups, have you tried to do a tier zero rebuild from your, infrastructure and not just code and apps and data and
No.
storage?
I mean that's where things like those tabletop scenarios, like actually doing the recovery, building it in another environment, seeing what that looks like and seeing if it's functional
Yeah, like
are
take Striker,
so
for
critical.
example,
Yeah.
200,000 devices wiped through your own MDM tool. Amazing.
Oh, God. My heart goes out to anyone who is in incident response or in IT at that company because
I actually have a little bit of sympathy for the executives because they had their personal
I would
phones
too.
wiped.
Oh
You imagine
no.
you're a CEO, you've done the
Yeah.
MDM enrollment. They said, trust us, we won't wipe. But of course, the Iranians didn't adhere
Yeah.
to that restriction, and Microsoft didn't prohibit it with a good baseline conditional access policy that says you need a fresh MFA, hardware key access token to wipe more than like 50 devices at once. They wiped
Yeah.
200,000 devices. Microsoft loves popping up these "Are you sure?" messages if you want to open up a terminal window as
Yeah.
administrator. And they don't have anything more robust as a default for like a
It
200,000
yeah,
MDM Intune.
it'll be interesting to see where it goes, right? Like, and if it will become something where Microsoft is sued later or something like that. Because I find the whole thing very fascinating. The entire
The shared
attack.
responsibility model. Anyone
Yeah.
can implement, and I just posted a great link that someone created for how to make a three-layer deep, anti-wipe policy, conditional access policy. Because
Yeah.
if they've compromised your credential, that existing security session token is going to let you do whatever you want. And those
Yep.
sessions are long-lived, right? And so you really do need to write new policies that say these particular actions require an approval from two administrators, both of which can't be using session tokens. They have to have fresh MFA on a
Yep.
hardware key.
Yeah. I mean, even if you just did a policy where you did this type of action requires a hardware or a token that has been created in the last X amount of time, it would be better. You'd still run the risk of credentials, but this in this attack specifically, they took the actual token and just did pass the hash. So it's interesting, right? So as you've kind of gotten into security more, right? Like when was your first like official like job where you started, I saw that you were the manager of web operations for a company called Organic like many, many years back. Like how did you even fall into a role where you started doing these like web operations type gigs and other
Mhm.
things like that? How did that
Yeah,
happen?
it was an interesting path for me because I got my master's in the philosophy of education from Stanford in 1991, and I went to work for a think tank for the Department of Education. That's what you do as a philosopher, studying education and being a technologist. And I
Right.
supported California, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah, K through 12, on the other side of an 800 number, giving out model technology grants, information technology programs, distance learning, all that kind of stuff. This was around the time when Al Gore was inventing the internet, right? So 94, right? 93, 94. And there were no CISOs, back when I joined Organic in 1998. I walked in the door and it was amazing. There was one Spark 5, right? A pizza box Sun server that was hosting Nike, McDonald's, Kinko's, Levi's, Volvo, right? All of these amazing brochure. Obviously, you couldn't do anything interesting on the websites, back in 1998. But it was awesome. It was the roaring 20s of our generation, your gray hair, my gray hair. And to be able to build things and protect them. And you did it out of your own preservation of your night's rest. You didn't want the
It,
pager going off saying Starbucks just
yeah,
went down. And
yeah,
I launched Starbucks in 1998, right? And
yeah. There was
gave them their first
no,
website.
yeah, there was no like anything, right? As far as like security, like there wasn't a role dedicated to security. It was just you did IT and then you did security, so you wouldn't be bothered. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that was the goal.
You turned on HTTPS. Oh, that sounds good. Let's do that.
Yeah, it's
And I
like,
gave
what
birth
does
to
this do?
PlayStation.com
We'll
for the
figure it out.
PS2. And when we
Yeah,
load tested that, right, the PS2 had fallen over when it launched in Japan because they had one Cisco Pix firewall in front of the website. And it reached like
right.
60,000 or something concurrent connections or something, and it fell over. So we had to load test to like 200,000 concurrent connections. And we used ATG Dynamo, we used Sun E6500s. We had 14 CPUs, in a set of four middleware, app servers. I mean, this was big iron back then, right? Sony really went to town on this infrastructure. So we designed it, we built it, we hosted it, and it was amazing, right? The PlayStation 2 was such a revolution. And, building an e-commerce platform back then, we built Blockbuster.com, we built Macy's e-commerce, all of these things were a part of me cutting my eye teeth, a part of that dot-com bubble.
That's awesome. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is, especially the younger generation, of like how much of it was just us failing and figuring stuff out. And I've talked about it before, like majority of us who have been doing this for a while, the way we learned was just by breaking stuff. We're
Mhm.
like, oh, that wasn't the right approach. That shouldn't have done that. There wasn't
Yeah, what is
really,
this XML thing? It's a
yeah.
specification. I wonder if it's got legs,
Hey,
1999.
Yeah, does
right?
this wonder if this is like this config file is important. Delete. Oh, yeah, I guess it was. Let me put that back. So, what do you think is missing from a lot of today's generation? For me, I think it's really that tinkering. I feel like the younger kids in their 20s and 30s, they don't play and they don't tinker, they don't break stuff. They don't have that kind of mindset to dig where we had no choice. What about you? Like, what do you think are some of the key areas that anyone who's listening who may be wanting to get into this field could work on?
Yeah, I think the perspective isn't just, a grumpy old man saying, get off of my lawn, or, we had it hard in the old days. We didn't have package managers. I had to compile Apache from source. I had to build the SO modules, the shared objects, to get, Perl to be a part, right, of my CGIs, right? My common gateway interface. The CGI is the precursor to the API, which is the precursor to the MCP, right? If you don't understand some of the basics, I feel like you're a sailor getting onto a ship and can't find the North Star, right? You have no business being on a ship sailing on the ocean if you can't find the North Star. And just similarly, when I interview DevOps engineers or InfoSec, or anyone, even VPs of engineering, sometimes I ask them, tell me the difference between TCP and UDP, and pretend you're talking to my parents. Don't use technology terms, right? Explain it. If you can't have those skills of explaining technical things to non-technical people, that's the thing that maybe ChatGPT and LLMs are getting better at, but you still need to have that cognitive tool belt, yourself to understand these concepts. You can't just become a parrot of, an LLM. And I'll mention my quick description on what I think about human knowledge versus, synthetic and, tokens, prediction engines. There was a student at NYU that was speaking at a conference, and they came up with this beautiful analogy, and I love to share it with everyone I can whenever I have a chance. Human knowledge is like sunlight. LLMs are like moonlight. It's just the reflection of human knowledge. And if you're a werewolf and a vampire howling at the moon saying, this is the shit, I am Jensen Huang, and I've got this, $2 trillion organization and I've got the hype cycle, and I'm surfing it. Um, it's not the shit. We will still always need human knowledge. We will still always need sunlight. We will still need nourishing, sustainable life on Earth, and that is sunlight. And as good as these models get, and as good as inference gets, and as fast as these CPUs get, and as trusted they can become, they will still be just cliff notes on steroids for the longest time. And some of the things that they try to predict about the future might be, indicative. But at the end of the day, I mean, human taste is going to arbit, what a fork should look like in the year 2035. Unless, of course, we totally fall prey to, the hype cycle and become, humans for rent, and LLMs are running the universe, right? There's
I
rent to
mean
human
that,
sites now for
uh,
OpenClaw agents to
yeah,
hire humans to do
I mean,
things.
I feel like if aliens kind of, or not if aliens, but if AIs kind of take over, they're not going to be they're not going to be like get rid of all humans. They need us. We're very beneficial. It's interesting too, right? Because so many people are like, "Oh, AI is taking jobs," but there's actually no evidence that shows that. In fact, there's a lot more evidence that shows that many companies who go all in on AI lay off a bunch of staffing, end up rolling that back within 6 to 8 months and start to bring those people back because
Yeah,
I think
it's a FOMO and FUD
it
driven
is. Yeah,
cycle,
yeah,
and
for sure.
executives are actually just failing to invest in their humans, and the humans are the ones that are better conductors and stewards of these agentic capabilities. So I think it'll be interesting though. I don't see it being too far off where I'm training up something, right? I've got a Kali Linux running out in the cloud. I've put OpenClaw on it. I've quarantined it. I've given it some very strict, .md, skills and descriptions saying you have to do a dry run, you have to have an audit trail, you have to get my approval, right? All of these things, all these guardrails are making my sort of, shadow sidekick into a very slow learner, but it's going to be a very trusted, sidekick. Eventually, I'm going to go send my, OpenClaw instance off to a conference, and it's going to get trained by your OpenClaw, sidekick, and it's not going to be me going and learning these skills, right? We're just going to be stewards and shepherds. There was a really great talk that someone gave on the WeDram recently, talking about some precedent for autonomy for agentic, and he was talking about animals. And if you have a flock of sheep and those sheep trample someone's fence and graze on someone else's field, you as the shepherd are responsible for the damages that those sheep cause. If a flock of agents doing 200, swarmed, pen tests against an API break the API or accidentally stray from the rules of engagement and go attack some other instance, right, and break it, you're going to be liable for that. There's no autonomy where you can put an algorithm in jail, right? The human's in the loop just so we can be thrown under the bus. And so I like to think of the animal farming kind of analogy right now for these flocks of agents.
I think it's a pretty accurate analogy too, right? Because a lot of these
Yeah, it goes
agents
back
are
to
going
Talmudic
out.
law. If your
Yeah.
ox is gored by someone else's ox, take aside whether they're, a practicing, religious practitioner or not as to who pays, right? That's the challenge, I guess, with old text. But in general, the idea is that are these dangerous animals that we're raising? Are they
Yeah.
like pit bulls where they should be put down, right, as soon as they bite someone?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Well, I mean, using your same pit bull analogy, is this a trained behavior, right? Because pit bulls, genetically are not angry or hostile animals. You can train them to be. But there's proven evidence that shows that, hey, these animals are not aggressive by nature. This is a nurture type situation. So is AI in that same boat where you're going to nurture the negative connotations of this AI, and then it becomes more kind of its user, so to speak. And
Mhm.
I think there's a good kind of discussion to be had around that. Is like as we get deeper and deeper into this, a lot of the models and things that are happening within these AIs and within agentic platforms is not fully understood even by the developers. It's not
Oh, definitely.
sentience.
Anyone that tells you otherwise is
Yeah.
talking out their ass.
Yeah.
Are we going to have an ethics.md file right next to memory.md and
Just go ahead.
soul.md?
You read this, and this is your ethics as a. I mean, they've got some guardrails that are similar to like an ethics.md, right? That you can
Mhm.
add to your agentic stuff. But
But the
I
AI just
find it
thinks of it as an obstacle to overcome. And
exactly.
so that's what's interesting about this sort of growth spurts in the Wild West that they're in. And yeah, you're right. I love the fact that philosophy feels totally germane to taxonomy, epistemology,
Yeah.
all of these things that are being discussed now around, intelligence, sentience, agency, autonomy, responsibility, accountability. So that's one of the talks that I'm giving at B-Sides in San Francisco next week. The epistemology of trust.
Oh, I love it. I've seen a few of your talks, and I really enjoy anyone who can go see Mike's stuff, and also check out Mike's, LinkedIn and any of his other stuff that he posts, because he always posts really insightful things, and he puts a lot of research and thought into it. He's very much like me. We're not putting out something that we don't necessarily know anything about. We're actively researching it before we even talk about it. We're not going to come out and discuss something without actually being at least a knowledgeable participant. We're not looking for clicks or growth. We're looking specifically to share knowledge that could be beneficial to all, right? And I think that's
Well,
what you've
thank you.
done.
Yeah. No, that's the
No,
reason why I teach at NYU and I'm teaching at Columbia this semester as well. I'm in the giving back
yes.
phase of my career where I want to bring knowledgeable philosopher kings into existence.
I'm I'm the exact same way, and I don't know if it's a phase that we all go through, like in our 40s and 50s, where we go, hey, let's just start sharing this knowledge. I talked to one of my mentees just recently, and he's now mentoring others and kind of sharing the knowledge and things that I've shared with him, and I find that so rewarding. I find that amazing that like that type of storytelling, that type of empathy and things is being continued to be shared. And that's why I love mentoring and kind of helping
Yeah,
people.
that's where it comes from. You build trust through good storytelling and good experience, right? And you're short-circuiting that if you just want to cut to the quick and get the fast answer out of a prompt, right? Or out of an agent and say, I wrote something that was in CIO.com recently about how, vibe coding has kind of sealed the engine on software development. And there's students graduating Stanford now that don't know how to write software in the computer science program, right? And it's a dumbing down. And I refer to Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance in it. And I talk about quality, right? And being close to the machine and having
Yeah.
an understanding, very tactile understanding of how things work, which goes back to your original question. What are good skills for people to have? Learn a little bit about networking. Stand up a couple of VMs, play around with, cloud, and learn how to do evil QA. Evil QA is the only way that we can be resilient. We have to break our own stuff before the threat actors break it, right?
Yeah, and I think that's critical is playing, tinkering, and building and breaking, knowing what your tools can kind of handle, and also understanding how they're built. Like very simple things, like like you said, build a VM, build a network, build a subnet, you know, um, build a VLAN. Understanding where that data goes and how it flows is critical in an incident response investigation. It's critical when you're just troubleshooting basic computer issues. There's so much value to understanding the way that data flows between two networks, that I think is really missed. Like you said, you've got people graduating, with degrees that don't actually know how to write code because all they've been doing is vibe coding. And there's a
Hmm.
place for vibe coding, but it's also like you said, it's removing our ability to learn. It's effectively
That
going,
cognitive load,
yeah,
that difficulty, that awkwardness,
yeah,
that pain that you go through, that's what learning is.
and it
And and
stays.
and what I find interesting is that experience is what you get when you were expecting something else. And if you
Yeah.
never have your expectations broken because you magically get, a stanza of PowerShell written for you or Bash or whatever,
Yeah.
you haven't learned. You just become an advanced power user of someone else's platform.
Yeah. No, and I'll kind of leave the audience with this. Like I've got multiple friends who are teachers and educators just like you. It's becoming more and more common for people to use the exact same prompt and then basically turn in the exact same paper.
Hmm.
And you're not learning from that. Even though I know it's a shortcut, even though I know there's, maybe it's something you're just not interested in. The fundamentals and things that you learn by failing and doing are what is the lesson. It doesn't matter the subject or the data, it's the way you learn and the way you absorb information is fundamentally formed at this early stage in your life. And if you're taking these shortcuts consistently, it's going to make it very hard for you to do it the long way in the long term. And a lot of what we do in security is long investigations, looking for that needle in the haystack, identifying those. You and I have both been through multiple together,
Hmm.
where we've investigated and we look for those kind of anomalous activity. And if you don't have that basic skill set,
How to
you're going
puzzle
to really
about
struggle.
things, right? How to
Yeah,
ask interesting questions and to second guess the results and responses and data that comes back, right? Don't have confirmation bias. There's a lot of
yeah,
confirmation bias happening with these LLMs that are just psychological fluffers, right? Telling you, yeah, that's a great question. You're the smartest person I've talked to today, kind of thing, right?
yeah. Well, it's designed to make you feel like you are, right? And it's
And
designed to
spend more
make you
tokens.
happy as the user. Yeah, let's spend more tokens and let's do some stuff. But no, Mike, I appreciate you coming on, brother. I appreciate your time. Please check out Mike Wilkes and his stuff. Awesome guy in general. He's a huge mentor, loves helping people too. Like if you have questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're happy to help. Thanks so much,
Yep.
Mike, for your time.
Awesome. Great talking to you.
See you, brother.
Cheers.